Hi everybody, I'm Andrew Locke. Welcome to Gaffer and Gear. In today's episode, we're going to be looking at the Spotlight Mini Zoom, which is Aputure's attachment for their 60X and 60D lines. Alright, so in case you don't know what this is, let me catch you up very quickly. This is an optical mount that is made for the Aputure 60D and Aputure 60X lights. So it gives you very, very fine optical control. So you can cut your light with a lot of precision, and you can also resize the beam. Alright, so a quick video is a good video. Let's get into the pros and cons of this unit straight away. I've only got the one negative, and the one negative for me is the tilt lock here. Now it's one of those tilt locks that has teeth. Okay, so what I don't like about it is, let's say we're doing some real precision work and we decide we want to have our beam, say, sitting about there. Now when I go to lock it, if I'm not in between the teeth, if I'm in between the teeth, I'm on top like that. When it locks, it's either going to go up or down. So let's see how we go here. Okay, so in that case it went up. So that's something I find frustrating, but that's the only negative I've got of the whole thing. Now you can work around that, of course, by lowering the light on the stand a little bit to get the angle, but it's just one of those things that irritates me, and a lot of lights have these teeth systems in them. All right, so let's get into the pros. So the pros for me are that this is the easiest to use zoom spot I have ever come across. Extremely easy to use. And the optical quality of this is easily the best optical quality I've come across on a zoom spot or on a zoomer. So with my previous zoom spots, I only use them on backgrounds, so say putting a pattern onto a background, or I use them to say put light into a reflector or put light through a diffusion frame. I wouldn't use them to directly light the talent with a gobo pattern or with hard cuts, because the optical quality isn't good enough. However, this unit's optical quality is good enough to do that. We'll talk about that later in the video. All right, so let's get into what you get for your money. Now the Spotlight Mini Zoom sells for about $500 US. So for that money, you get the bag, and the bag is custom cut on the inside so that the Mini Zoom fits in beautifully. So there's no chance of it getting damaged in transport. You get the Mini Zoom, of course. Now the Mini Zoom is very well constructed. Okay, so it's aluminium and a composite material, very strong, well worth the money in terms of its build quality and its optical quality. You get an iris. Now on a lot of units, the iris is an optional extra. So to get an 18 leaf iris like this included is very, very good. Now just a little thing I'll mention for you. If you're using the iris, I'd suggest storing it with the blades tucked away like that, because it's not going to get damaged that way, because the blades are quite fine. And you get a kit of gobos to get you started. So there's 14 gobos. There's 15 in total, but we'll call it 14. So there's some very good shapes, very good things for backgrounds, fences, tree sort of patterns, stuff that works very good in and out of focus. So in your backgrounds, if you're doing interviews. You got Venetian blinds, lots of good useful patterns here, very, very useful patterns. But there's one pattern that's particularly interesting, and that is they also give you this A. Now just to show you how versatile this kit is, you can use it as an A, you can use it as a Y, and you can even use it as a V. Now before anybody messages me, I just want to point out, I do know that that's the Aputure logo. I'm just having a play with you. All right, so if you're not happy with any of the patterns you get here, here's the good news. These are a standard M size gobo. So that means you can go to companies like Roscoe and pick from thousands of gobo patterns. So that's a real plus for these units. All right, so before we get into testing and showing this off, I just want to go through some numbers. So I've done some testing at 3 meters to have a look at the brightness. Now these numbers are with the 60X here. So in tungsten in flood, so full flood is 30 degrees. I got 246 lux. Now when I put that into spot, I got 1000 lux. Now set to daylight, 5600 Kelvin, I got 297 lux at 30 degrees. And zoomed into 15 degrees, I got 1140 lux. So what that means, to really simplify it, is you're only going to get about 43% of the light's output through the projector. Right, so let's go through operating this unit. So you mount the light to the back. in the barn door holder. Lock the latch down. That's pretty much that done. Now, in terms of operating your zoom spot, your focus is here, so you undo the locker and you move the barrel back and forwards. Now, you want to do it with two hands like this. If you're trying to do it with one hand, it's almost impossible. But if you're looking at what you're doing and using it with two hands, it's very, very simple. The next thing is your zoom that's on the front here. So that's just to rotate. Very, very simple to operate. Now, one thing I almost forgot to mention is make sure you've got the light in the spot position. If you have it in the flood position, you'll get some stray light coming off the barrel, and you'll also get some double edging on some of your cuts. All right, so let's have a look at how simple this is to operate. Okay, so let's get a focus. Now, if you've never used a zoom spot before, then you've got no idea how easy this is. But if you've used one before, you'll be amazed. Okay, let's have a look at our zoom. Very, very simple to operate, very clean to operate. Now, in terms of the focus, if you're in, say, the bottom third of your zoom, you're going to have to refocus. But yeah, it's not a big deal. So I just need to refocus that. And there I am, I'm refocused. So it's the easiest zoom spot I've ever operated. Now, I just realized I've been a little bit arrogant here. I've been assuming that you know how to use a spotlight mount. So I'm just going to quickly show you some of the features. So they have 4 built-in blades, so you can create shapes. So it's like having an internal set of barn doors. Now, they're upside down and back to front. So left is right, right is left, and the top is the bottom and the bottom is the top. But you can move those all around independently. Now, you can't rotate the barrel. So that's as big a bigger angle slash as you can get without having to rotate the light. Now, you've also got a gobo slot. So the gobos are the metal patterns, so you can drop your gobos in. Okay, so let's focus that up. There you go. So you can project patterns, and it does come with the standard size gobo holder. So I think it's an M series gobo. And you've also got an iris. So I'll just pull this out. So the iris is an adjustable slot. So you can make a very, very small circle. Let's get that into focus. So we can zoom right down and then use the iris to get a really, really small pinpoint. One thing I hate with a lot of spotlights and projector mounts is when you're trying to do very, very fine precision blade work and you notice you've got a speck of dust or a hair on the blades and it really, really stands out. That can be a real pain to clean, but not with this unit. You just take the light off and there's your blades right there. Give it a blow, put the light back on, and you're ready to go. It's quick as that. Now, before we get into picking the optics apart, there's just one thing I want to point out. This unit is going to have more chromatic aberration or more color fringing than any other spotlight mount that I've tested. And here's why. Because it's a zoom lens. So think about it the same way as you'd think about camera lenses. If you have a zoom lens, you can reframe your image really, really quickly, but you get more chromatic aberration or more color fraying than you do with a prime lens. The same thing applies with this. Now let's have a look at this thing in the real world in a worst case scenario. So a worst case scenario would be lighting a close-up with one of these, direct light, hard shadows, and no Photoshop. So this is the only light lighting the Talon. As you can see, it's hard cuts on her. Now there's no Photoshopping done here. This is straight out of the camera. Now, if you have a really close look, you can see chromatic aberration here, but I really want to make the point here that this projector mount is fit for purpose. Now, this is probably the worst case scenario. We've got direct light, hard cuts in a close-up, no Photoshopping. If you have a close look, there is color fraying or chromatic aberration there. Using it less dramatically, you easily get away with the chromatic aberration that's present. In this shot, it's defocused. The verticals are done with the blades, and the top circular cut is the very edge of the beam. So as you can see, it's a very usable tool. And this shot's in black and white just for mood, but it gives you some real idea of what you can do with this fixture. So as you can see there was some chromatic aberration or color fraying. Now, if you were using a fixed lens system, and it was a very good fixed lens system, you would have less of that color fraying. But here's the thing, if I needed to readjust where the pattern was on the actor, I'd have to pick up the light and move it. So it's a bit of a reset, whereas with the zoom, I can just do that. So it saves you some time, but of course you've got the disadvantage of you do get a little bit more aberration or a little bit more color fraying. All right, so before we go on any further, a big thank you to Stan Trianedes, who's the stills photographer who took those images, for allowing me to collaborate with him in this video for the testing. All right, so on the background there, I've got a very, very complex gobo pattern. Now, from the camera's position, that's going to look, or even from my eyes, that's going to look very sharp. It's not going to look like there's any aberration there at all. But when we go in and have a closer look, you'll see that some is there. So let's take my B camera, aka my mobile phone, and have a look. All right, so in the center of the beam, there's very little chromatic aberration. That's pretty much normal on all sort of projectors or ellipsoidal lens systems. If you go to the edge, that's where you see the chromatic aberration or the color fraying. Okay, so you can see it there quite clearly. Now, from a distance, you can't see it. Okay, it's only when you get in really, really tight that you can see it. Now, this is very minimal for a zoom spot. Most zoom spots have way more than this, so this is actually quite clean. So that's what I'm talking about when I talk about chromatic aberration or color fraying. Now, just to make the point, if I was filming something like, say, a packet of multivitamins, something very, very small, and we're using a projector or zoom spot to try and highlight the name, then that's a situation where that sort of color fraying or chromatic aberration would be a problem. So in that situation, I wouldn't use something like this. I'd use something like my dado kit, for example. Okay, now let's do the same thing, but this time on full spot. Okay, so full zoom in. Let's see how we go. All right, so on full zoom, it's very, very clear, the center of the beam. Very, very clean. On the edge, about the same amount of aberration or color fraying there. But one thing I do notice, on the edge of the beam, it's not as sharp when fully zoomed as it is in the center. Okay, but you know, from a distance, from not even very far away, that is very sharp. The whole lot looks very, very clean. Now, what I'm looking for with this pattern is concaving or convexing. So at the moment, it's definitely concaving on the edges. So the centers, the center lines are fairly straight, but as we go further out, they start to bend a little bit. There's not much in it. I mean, if I didn't point it out, you probably wouldn't notice it. Now, what I'm going to do is zoom in and see if that changes. Okay, now there it's looking pretty square. So I'm actually lining that up to some of the lines on my garage. And that's perfectly square at that point. Okay, so all the way down to there's perfectly square. Let's go back out. Still perfectly square. Okay, slight concaving there. Okay, and slight concaving all the way out to there. Now what I'm checking for with this pattern is that all of the circles are the same size. And if we had perfect optics, all of the circles would also be the same sharpness. Now that doesn't happen all that often. More often than not, particularly with wide angle lenses, the outside circles are a bit soft. All right, so all of the circles are the same size and they're all round, so that's a very good start. Let's pop in and have a look, see how they are in terms of their focus. All right, so the center of the beam is very, very sharp, and on the outside we do get a little bit softer. But overall, not too bad at all. Now this time we're doing the same thing again, but this time I've zoomed in. They're looking very, very good. Let's go and have a look. All right, so that's all my testing done. I'm pretty impressed with it. It's very sharp for a zoom spot. Most zoom spots are not this sharp. And this is so simple to use. Most zoom spots, you adjust the size of the beam, then when you adjust the focus, the beam size changes again. So they're a real battle to get what you want, whereas this is very, very simple. Now, this is called the Zoom Spot Mini, and you might be thinking, well, you know what, it's not all that small, it's actually quite large. And you know, for a 60-watt projector system, it is quite big, but got to bear in mind it is a zoom spot. This is a traditional zoom spot to give you some idea of size. So yeah, that one is quite small in comparison. All right, I'm Andrew Locke. See you on the next episode of Gaffer and Gear.